I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today we're talking to Shante Avant, President and CEO of the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis. So stay with us for a conversation with Shante. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting. I've only done a few podcasts, but yeah I've listened to this one and I'm excited to be a guest.
That's great. We should also note, although we're not going to dwell on it, you are chair of the county commission right now. How long have you been on the commission?
I was elected in 2022.
Okay.
And that was when they first redistricted and Cordova had its first county commissioner. So I'm the first county commissioner for Cordova, District 5. And so it's great to be able to have these dual roles in our community because I get to see a lot of the things that make Memphis great and Memphis and Shelby County great, and then also what opportunities lie ahead of us.
Yeah. And we're not going to talk politics today. This isn't really a politics show. Also, we are holding this for 2 weeks, so who knows? If we did want to talk about politics, how irrelevant all that would be. And you were school board before that. Okay.
I served on the school board for 8 years, and so that was a really great experience. And also one of the reasons why I decided to run for county commission, because education is funded by the commission, by the county. And so it's important. Those things are important to me.
How many people, Women's Foundation, you've been there for 18 years.
18 years.
We were just talking before.
I know, it only looks like I should have been there 3 years. But
exactly.
People can't see that. But yes, I don't look like I should have been there for 18 years.
And the president and CEO since 23, is that what you said?
Yes, for 2.5 years now.
How many people, when you're running for office, assume that being county commission or even the school board is a full-time job? Are they surprised that you have an actual, I don't want to say it's not a job, it is a job and it's a big time commitment.
It is.
But how many people are like, what? You have a full-time job?
Yeah, and I think people have different perspectives on it, right? Yes, they're surprised that you have another full-time job. The question I get asked more is like, how do you do both? Like, how do you do all of those things? But my response is always the same. I love this community in any way that I can serve. And that's one of the things that I like doing most is serving and helping this community. I feel like I get to do that from dual roles, from my seat as president and CEO of the Women's Foundation, and then as a legislator for the county commission, where, we have resources to really try to legislate and solve some of the county's challenges and opportunities.
Are there times, this isn't politics, all these dynamics are interesting to me. Times where you have to step back from something maybe the county's doing because of work that the foundation is doing, or the Women's Foundation is doing?
Oh, yes. You always want to make sure that there's never a conflict of interest, and that is very important to me and the people I serve on both sides, from both seats. Because you'll get people have an ownership interest. It comes up, and I hadn't thought about it with you. For people who, let's do the quick version. People have never heard of the Women's Foundation or, just don't know what it is. Give me the 30-second, and then we'll talk about programs and everything. Sure. Yeah, we're a philanthropic organization that is actually celebrating 30 years. And we invest in nonprofit organizations that help low-income women and children. And so since 1995, we've actually invested $37 million into this community in grants, programs, and initiatives to support the economic security of women and children in our community.
People who, in my experience, people who are involved with the Women's Foundation, and there's a big board, there's a board of trustees and a board of directors, they are fierce, in the best way, advocates for the work that the foundation. You got to know. And I'm not saying this cynically. It's just more, as much as any other organization I can think of, St. Jude level, people who are involved with St. Jude who are just so passionate about it. I always get that about the Women's Foundation.
Oh, we have. Fierce is a great word. They are, I would say, the most powerful women in the city in the right way that you think about holding power, right? That you're wanting to help move your community forward. We have a board of 35 board members and 11 trustees. These are women from every industry in this community who are providing not only their commitment to our organization, but their expertise in leadership and how we move Memphis forward, and they see that through how you support some of the most marginalized folks in our communities. And so if you're moving poverty or dismantling poverty for women and children, you're only doing what's best in moving our city forward.
And 30 years, which is interesting. So I think I moved here in 96 or 95. So it's, it's interesting, 30 years. And I was trying to think, where was I in 95? I was in New York, about ready to move here. You look at the successes Let's start there. And then things that you learned, lessons learned that the foundation's learned over that time that didn't work, but you've learned from it. But let's talk about some of the successes.
I think some of the greatest successes we've had is our involvement in the public-private partnerships in the city of Memphis. So we've been a part of 4 revitalization projects, beginning with Lamar Terrace, which is now University Place, Legend Dixie Homes, which is now Legends Park, Claiborne Homes, which is now Claiborne Park, and then all of those public-private partnerships and revitalizations of those communities have happened around and spurred economic development. So you think about University Place, and that was the remodeling of University Hospital and the Shore wing. And then you have Legends Park, and you have Le Bonheur Hospital and their economic development and building their new hospital. So all of these have been centered around ways that we have led and helped support economic development in this community. And we don't talk about it from that standpoint because we're talking about how we're helping women and children, but we're also really impacting the economic development of this community and the work that we've been able to do. And so we've raised funds to help those families and been a part of those public-private partnerships. And more importantly, those areas where there has been a lot of de-investment, helping families come back to these revitalized communities.
I can remember on Behind the Headlines over on WKNO, like 15 years, and covering as that was, it had started, the transformation of those. Archie Willis. Archie being on the show many, many times and talking about that. And I remember Paul Young, before he was mayor, he was either Housing Community Development or maybe he was at Downtown Memphis Commission.
He was with ComCap. Partners with Archie, and then he was with HCD and Downtown Commission, and I've worked with him in all of those roles because of the work we've done at the foundation.
And so, like, talking about that transformation of those housing, and I remember Paul and Archie talking about, I should say the mayor and Archie, Paul and Archie talking about, I think Paul's family grew up in what is now South City, I think in that area.
That's right.
And he talked about the phrase that has never left me was warehousing the poor. That all of that public housing coming out of the slum, quote unquote, clearances. It was a national phenomenon, Robert Moses, New York, and all that. And it was all about putting up fences, generic homes, destroying a lot of community. And that what was trying to be done, and I didn't realize your involvement, the Women's Foundation involvement, is try to make communities, which was the process of doing that was sometimes controversial because it was so disruptive, because you had to literally raise people's homes in what was not great public housing and not well-built communities, and then try to get people to move back. But it would take, of course, years to build all the new housing.
That's right.
So I didn't realize y'all were involved in that. And that public housing was terrible in many ways for this community, and it's been great that it's transformed, but it was an incredibly difficult process for everyone. It was.
And, that's where I think the role of the foundation was really important. We were the philanthropic partners. So our role was really to raise the funds to support the families that were being moved out of those communities, but then also the skills, equipping them to be able to be in these mixed income communities, right? So that you had folks who were paying market rate, and you have people who have subsidized housing, but they are living in revitalized communities. And for many of those families, you think about that, it's been years, it was decades of de-investment, right? Yeah. But they get to come back and live in a community, 2 miles from FedEx Forum, right? They get to walk to a Grizzlies game and participate in this community that is now thriving. And you have so many anchor institutions that always were rich in culture in this community. Booker T. Washington High School, right? Yeah. One of the oldest high schools in this community, built back in 1867, right? But it's still a very important integral part of when you think about South Memphis and you think about South City in that community, that those anchors and building on those institutional organizations and what they mean to the community, that's an important piece of the continuity that we provided and how you think about what community needs to look like.
Is when you talk about helping in that situation, maybe in others, women and children, is it money directly from the the Women's Foundation, is it directing them to other sources of income and support? Is it all of that? I mean, the sort of notion of wraparound services, that it's not one thing or one check or one person. It's all about a kind of network of support.
That's correct. And so for us, it's investing in these organizations that provide a myriad of supports to families, whether that is case management and wraparound services to meet basic needs, whether it's job training and placement, all around the workforce development piece, whether it is around youth development and how you're really creating. And what for us, it's a 2-generation approach. We are not just providing services to the parent. We're providing services to both parent and children so that you are disrupting that kind of cycle of what happens sometimes, so many times in low-income communities where there's lack of resources, but we're providing those resources to the entire family. And we do that through the organizations that we provide funds to that provide services to those families.
What's the biggest, if this is even a fair question, what's one of the biggest maybe impediments to breaking that cycle? I mean, do you have folks you work with, I know, folks you work with who you break that cycle and their success stories? When it's not successful, and I don't mean this to dwell on the negative, I mean to sort of like learn about what do you learn from those situations where you feel like we couldn't break that cycle?
So it is not a one-stop shop that helps people get out of poverty. And it is not a one occurrence. It's not a one service provider. It usually is a myriad of services that families need. So for instance, if your car breaks down, you call AAA. There's no AAA for someone who's making not even a living wage, right? So that one incident can cause a ripple effect, that you don't have income coming in, you have no way to get your children to daycare, you have no way to get to your job. And so the ripple effect of that is why we understand that it's a comprehensive approach to how you have to help families move from, sufficiency to eventually security. And it's not something that is maybe a year process. Sometimes it's going to take years. And it will be many ways in which you have to support that family in order for them to be able to move to that stability and then ultimately security.
I'll remind everyone we're here with Shante Avant, who is president and CEO of the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis. I learned that today. I was like, wait, that's for Greater Memphis.
4.
Yeah. Also chair of the county commission. We're not talking politics today particularly, but we'll be right back with Shante. I want to take just a second and do a little housekeeping and remind everyone I'm Eric Barnes. This is The Sidebar. It airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on community, arts, culture, everything in between. It's not just a radio show, though. It's one of many weekly and daily podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including our morning podcast, AMDM, with Mary Casciola, our editorial director, and Natalie Van Gundy, who's sitting next to me and produces all of our podcasts and does the news on WYXR and helps put news together for WKNO every morning. We also do the Memphis Grizzlies podcast and our food podcast, Sound Bites, hosted by Holly Whitfield, which also airs on WYXR every Thursday at 11. I mentioned Behind the Headlines, the show we produce with the folks over at WKNO TV every week, going into our 16th season. I don't know how that happened, but it did. All of our podcasts, including Behind the Headlines, are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get the WYXR shows at WYXR.org or on the WYXR app, including all the WYXR shows, not just the Daily Memphian ones. That's talk shows and music shows and archives of all those shows. If you're not a supporter of WYXR, do consider becoming one. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. Just had its big pledge drive and I think 4th anniversary or 5th anniversary. I think it's the 5th anniversary of WYXR, which blows my mind. That was just happened, I think, just last week or so. We are having our anniversary, I should say, too. The Daily Memphian turned 7 a week or so ago from when this aired, which is crazy. If you're not a paid subscriber to the Daily Memphian, do consider becoming one. You get access to all our content, all our articles, comments if you want. I don't know. It's a mixed bag. But you don't have to read the comments. But you can only get to them if you are a subscriber. We're also a nonprofit, though, the largest newsroom in the region. And subscriptions pay for about half of what we do. Advertising and other things pay for another quarter of it. But about 20% of what we do is supported by philanthropy. So consider becoming a supporter. Recently on the sidebar, we had Cindy Yonker. She is the head of the Buckman Center for Performing Arts. We had Park Kennedy, the new head of GPAC, and a whole bunch of other shows. Coming up soon on Behind the Headlines, John Zena, I keep calling him the czar of infrastructure. Is that, Shante? That can't really be his title. It's like, it's a really long title, but it's John. And so it's, he's got the good socks, the nice ties, and now he's the czar of public infrastructure locally. We'll talk to John about that coming up soon on Behind the Headlines, and recently had a show on with the head of the U of M School of Public Health, talking about all the complexities of that right now. Last bit of housekeeping, our next seminar, our business seminar, is coming up at the Botanic Gardens October 23rd at 3 p.m. That's Developing Memphis. We'll have Todd Richardson from Crosstown, Shondell Ryan from the Downtown Memphis Commission. Okay, John and his firm, I will say, have done a bunch of really cool developments in the Edge District, the medical district. Also, J. Lawrence Turner, who's pastor of Mississippi Boulevard Church, they've got a big proposal for $200 million in development there. He'll be talking about that as well. All that is at Developing Memphis, October 23rd at 3 p.m. And you can go from there on October 23rd to
The Power of the Purse, hosted by the Women's Foundation.
There we go.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun event. It is Thursday, October 23rd from 6 to 8 p.m. And it's at the Children's Museum. And so we have a whole silent and live auction that takes place right around the carousel. It's really fun. And so I don't want folks to think, because it says Women's Foundation, that it's only for women. It is for women and men. We have a great team of folks who put together a really great event that is fun, food, and a little bit of fashion. But we have live music, great drinks, great food, and then you get some great deals participating in our online auction.
And I should clarify, it was just coincidence, actually. We were putting some notes together before we started here that we have that Developing Memphis from 3 till like 5:30. And it's only about a 10-minute drive from Developing Memphis, from the Botanic Garden over to the Children's Museum.
So you should come and check us out.
Do people need to get tickets?
They do. You can purchase tickets on our website, which is wfgm.org. Tickets are $75, but you get so many great things as a part of that ticket, and you do get to ride the carousel, which surprisingly so many people haven't done, but it is really fun to do.
Yeah, it's funny because I haven't been to the Children's Museum because my kids are old now, so I need to go to that or something, and just to kind of experience the Children's Museum. We were talking a little before we started taping about COVID and the time warp that is COVID and all that, but how did that? It must have had a huge impact on the work you're doing. I mean, just a massive impact. People at home, kids out of school. And then how has it lingered? We're 5 years from peak COVID, but how has it lingered for you in the work you all do?
COVID was a interesting time for everyone in the world, right? But it even magnified some of the disparities that low-income families felt during a time where you're isolated and you don't have access to things that were like common for us, right? In my home, I had access to Wi-Fi. So it didn't stop or interrupt some certain things in my life. But for many of our families, we understood how inequities and disparities really impacted them and their families. We leaned in many ways. We started doing mobile food drives to help families who were in our communities and didn't have access to some of those resources. We leaned in and did a South City digital inclusion plan. And so creating broadband and Wi-Fi digital literacy and education for families, 1,000 families that were impacted. And that was through philanthropic efforts with some of our partners here in the city. And then it also helped us think through what is a broader infrastructure of both social and economic mobility for families who are living in those communities, so that when you have a life-changing, life-altering thing like COVID and how it impacts you and your family, we have seen that not only did it affect unemployment, but some of those statistics are still lingering from people who were not able to easily moved back into the workforce, or that jobs were very different in how you moved back into the workforce, or what kind of training you needed to move back into the workforce that was creating jobs that were actually providing a living wage for you and your family. So there were a lot of adjustments that had to be made. And so it helped us think through really some very concrete strategies, because we're doing a place-based strategy. We're located in the poorest zip codes in the city of Memphis, is where we've concentrated our work. 38126, which when we started our work, the average household income was $6,600 a year. If you can imagine a family living off of that. And so we've increased those, economic income ratios by 20% for families that are living in that community. And it may not seem like a lot, but I mean, that's growth for how you're helping families move more towards security, economic security.
The other lingering thing from COVID we've talked about either on this show or maybe it was on Behind the Headlines, and it's a national phenomenon of kids not getting back in school, that the truancy, delinquency, whatever the proper term is, I mean, chronic absenteeism, thank you, Natalie, has lingered. And it's just like, we had some folks from charter schools on, I think it was on Behind the Headlines, and it was really both amazing and daunting, that the hard work it takes in some cases, because you've got a list, you start calling in the morning, you start checking on families, what's going on, then you try to get it was really impressive, the work that those schools were doing. And it's not just them, it was just the 2 or 3 schools we had on. But it was also so daunting that that's what it takes, is because there's a cultural shift nationally, kids not getting back into school. And have you guys tried to address that, or is that outside your scope? I mean, how do you deal with all that?
So when we're, as part of being a part of the community, and I want to make sure that I'm clear that we don't come into communities telling folks what needs to happen. We work in community with, because we do believe that the people who are most approximate to the problems are the best authors of those solutions. And so adopting schools within our zip codes is part of what we saw as a strategy of how we work in community. So we work with school administrators and teachers. And, one of the things that we provided in our zip code in 38126 was the emergence of a community school. So that in the school in Booker T. Washington, there's a community school so that it meets the needs in a trusted environment for the families who live there. So that's resources around health, mental health supports. We also have a food and essentials hub, so families can make appointments to get essential things like food, detergent, school supplies for kids right there at the school, right? So that it isn't a barrier. Transportation, we know, is one of the biggest barriers, so I'm not going to even go into
we said we weren't doing politics.
We're not doing politics, But
also, we don't want to be sad.
Yes. So transportation being one of the biggest barriers, so putting those resources right there in the community in a trusted institution for families was something we began back in 2018, and we were happy to have this now resource center now in a full community school model.
Yeah, that has always made so much sense to me. That school, I can remember, and this is sort of sad and pitiful, but when I first got into reporting, and this was up in small town Connecticut, upper middle class, wasn't rich Connecticut, but it was middle class Connecticut, small towns. This is back when I'd go to a school board meeting and there'd be reporters from 3 or 4 different newspapers. This is a town of 5,000 people.
Okay.
It's crazy. But they were starting to try to expand a little bit some services, and just residents standing up and say, that's not what schools are for. It's reading, writing, arithmetic. Why are we doing this? In my day, the teacher drove the bus. All you can imagine, especially your school board, the sort of like old school thoughts about what a school is. But for so many people, I had kids. School is kind of the center of your life for a period of time. You're doing sports through it. You're doing after school programs. Your kids have friends there. Some of my best friends in Memphis are parents of my kids. Now the kids are wherever they are, but we're still, I'm having, a beer with a friend today our kids grew up together. So why not extend some of these services to the school? It just makes perfect sense. It's a lot, but it's the natural place for so much of this, it seems to me.
It is. And it is not the responsibility of the school, but it is the responsibility of community to come together as a part of the school.
Much better way to say it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Because we know that there are finite resources that schools have, but how do you create opportunities that resources can become available to the families that need them for people who are providing those resources, right? So if you have a nonprofit and you have a small office in our community and school, it makes sense for families not to have a wrong door in some of the ways that you're also trying to make sure that they're able to support their kids to the best academic success, right? So you talked about truancy, right? How do you make sure that your students have the supplies they need to come to school so that it doesn't deter them from coming to school because they don't have the supplies that they need, right? Yeah. So these are small things that sometimes get overlooked about what it takes in a continuum of care to help folks who are living in poverty and need not a hand out, but a hand up.
Yeah. I said we weren't going to talk politics, and I don't mean this in a political way. It is just a fact that there are a lot of federal cuts coming to nonprofits and community organizations and government programs. Are you all, in the work you do, seeing and feeling the cuts yet?
Yes. We felt the cuts back in February and March. And as most nonprofits who are on their fiscal year ends June 30th, you saw the tremendous push for them to be able to maintain services for families in this community. To say that we will not all be impacted and how that shows up in our community is an understatement. And we need to be prepared for how, and there's no way that you can even philanthropy can't even make up.
Well, sorry, not to interrupt you, but I'm glad you said that. I mean, Memphis is a very generous place. There's some big philanthropies that do a lot of, we're partly philanthropy at Daily Memphian, WYXR. It's a very generous city, statistically one of, per capita generosity and so on. I feel like sometimes people think, oh yeah, philanthropy, they'll fill these gaps like that.
Yeah, there's no way for us to make up the difference in what these cuts will be for organizations that are providing essential services to families. And so we have to be prepared of what that will look like when there is so much need in this community that philanthropy, there's no way for us to make up the deficits that so many of our organizations are facing.
That's depressing.
It is. And we weren't going to talk politics, so we weren't going to be sad.
But on the other hand, it's the fact.
It is.
It's not the political judgment of it. It's just that is this reality that has happened. So we're almost out of time here. I always try to ask people, what was your first concert?
Oh, my first concert was New Edition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here in Memphis?
At the Mid-South Coliseum.
Nice.
It was amazing.
Natalie's very happy over there. She is real happy.
I like that that's so many people's first location for a concert.
Yes,
it was the Mid-South Coliseum.
Yes.
Yeah. But I'm going to say one of the best concerts I ever saw at Mid-South Coliseum was probably LL Cool J. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
When he was doing Rock the Bells. It was yes.
That's really good.
Classic.
Shante, thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed it. People, again, you've got Power of the Purse coming up October 23rd. People go to where?
Our website, wfgm.org.
And if they want to get involved and learn more about the programs, I assume they can go there and learn about that. Yeah.
And one of the best ways to get involved is to think about how you can make a contribution to our organization, because your investment is leveraged, and it's the collaborative approach of how we can support so many families in this community.
All right, that is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the show today, you can go to the Daily Memphian site. You can go to iTunes, Spotify, WYXR, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.